everyone, and welcome to Kiki Crochet. In this video tutorial we're going to learn how to crochet step by step the Alpine stitch. Now this stitch is suitable for all projects. You can make scarves, hats, blankets, you can make crochet bags, gloves, sweaters, jackets, whatever you like you can make with this stitch. It's beautiful and very simple. Now the rule for this stitch is multiples of 2, so any even number of stitches will do. And the repeating rows are rows 4 to row 7. Now let's see how to work this stitch, and then please stay with me until the end because we're going to learn how to, using our sample, how to calculate the number of chains that we need to start any project. We're going to learn how by using the sample we can calculate the total rows needed, and then in the end we're going to see how to calculate how much yarn we need for a project. Okay, so let's start. For my sample I'm starting with a total of 26 chains. I'm crocheting with a lightweight yarn and a 4mm crochet hook. So let's start with row 1, and I'm going to skip the first chain and I'm going to put my hook in the second one, and I'm going to work one single crochet in every stitch across, and I've started with 26 chains, and because row 1 is done with single crochet I'm going to have a total of 25 stitches. Okay, skip the first stitch, starting from the second one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and keep crocheting up until the last chain over here for a total of 25 single crochet. I've worked my 25 single crochet. Now we're going to start row 2. I'm going to chain 2 and I'm going to turn my work. Now usually when I work a row of double crochet we need to start with a total of 3 chains because the 3 chains count as a double crochet. I'm starting with 2 just because I don't get a big gap in the beginning of my work. Having said this, we're not going to start crocheting from the first stitch but from the second stitch of the row. Okay, so let's start. 2, next stitch, 3, 4, 5, and keep crocheting one double crochet in every stitch across for a total of 25 stitches, and the last double crochet will fall right here on the last single crochet of the row. This will be your 25th stitch. I have completed row 2 with 25 double crochet. Now we're going to start row 3. Now every time we are working the row of single crochet, that will be the wrong side of our project. Every row that we're working the double crochet, which from here on we're going to be working the Alpine stitch, it's going to be the good side. So chain 1 and turn your work. Starting from the first stitch right over here, we're going to work one single crochet in every stitch across. So 1, next stitch, 2, 3, 4, 5, and keep crocheting for a total of 25 single crochet, where the last stitch of the row will be right here on the 2 chains that we worked in the beginning of the previous row, counting from the bottom to the top. Put your hook right here in the peak on the second chain. This will be your 25th stitch. I've completed row 3 with a total of 25 single crochet. Now we're going to start row 4, which is the first row of repetitions. Chain 2 and turn your work. As I mentioned earlier, the 2 chains are my first double crochet, so I'm not going to start crocheting from the first stitch but from the second one. And because I'm going to start creating the Alpine stitch, I'm going to go down here in the second double crochet, and I'm going to put my hook around it. So I'm going to put my hook from the front to the back on the right side of the stitch, and I'm going to bring it out to the front again on the left side. So I'm pulling outwards the double crochet. Now grab the yarn, pull it under the stitch, and I want you to extend the loops up until they reach the length of the loop that we have on our hook, the first one over here. Okay, and now work your double crochet. So grab the yarn, pull through the first 2 loops, grab the yarn, pull through the next 2 loops. And now we're going to be working a front post double crochet around every second stitch. So in the next stitch I'm going to work a double crochet, and on the second one a front post. And since this was my front post, I'm skipping this and I'm crocheting around this. Second one, and so on. So now I'm going to work 1 double crochet in the next stitch, and I want you to be aware that since I worked the front post double crochet around the stitch, it's the same thing as having crocheted in the stitch that's right behind it. So please do not open up the stitch to work a double crochet in here, because it's going to seem as if you're working an increase. So we want to crochet in the next stitch, which is this one over here, and I want to work 1 double crochet. And see how my stitches are straight? If you do not crochet your stitches correctly and you have a result as this one, like a diagonal stitch, this means that somewhere you have skipped a stitch, and you have to be aware so your design isn't coming out wrong. Okay, so let's continue. 1 double crochet in the next stitch, and around the next stitch we're going to work the alpine stitch, the front post. Okay, so this is the next stitch, that's the double crochet that belongs to it. So put your hook from the front to the back on the right side of the stitch, bring it out to the front again from the left side, grab the yarn, pull it under the stitch, extend your loops to reach the height of the first loop over here, grab the yarn, pull through the first 2 loops, through the next 2 loops. In the next stitch I'm going to work 1 double crochet. In the next stitch I'm going to work 1 front post double crochet in the row below, which is, this is the next stitch, this is the double crochet beneath it. So work a front post double crochet, grab the yarn, pull it under the stitch, extend your loops, grab the yarn, pull through the first 2 loops, through the last 2 loops. Okay, 1 double crochet in the next stitch. In the next stitch we're going to work the front post. So this is a double crochet beneath it, pull it outwards, grab the yarn, pull it under the stitch, extend your loops, grab the yarn, pull through the first 2 loops and through the last 2 loops. 1 double crochet in the next stitch. The next one will be a front post double crochet in the row beneath. This one over here is a double crochet, pull it out, grab the yarn, pull it under the stitch, extend your loops, grab the yarn, pull through 2, pull through the last 2. And can you see that we are working front posts in every second stitch? Here, 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 here. Okay. Next stitch is going to be 1 double crochet. Next stitch, a front post in the row beneath. Extend the loops and work your double crochet. Next stitch, 1 double crochet. Next stitch, work a front post double crochet in the row beneath. Extend the loops and work your double crochet. 1 double crochet in the next stitch. 1 front post double crochet in the next stitch in the row beneath. 1 double crochet in the next stitch, 1 front post double crochet around the next one, 1 double crochet in the next stitch, 1 front post double crochet around the next one, 1 double crochet in the next stitch, 1 front post double crochet in the next one, 1 double crochet in the next stitch. Okay, and this is the second before the last stitch over here, in which I'm going to work a front post double crochet in this one over here, and 1 double crochet in the last stitch of the row. So this is how row number 4 looks like. Now we're going to start row 5, which is the second row of repetitions. Chain 1 and turn work, and because we're on the wrong side, we're going to work 1 single crochet in every stitch for a total of 25 stitches, starting from the first one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and keep working 1 single crochet in every stitch up until the last one of the row, which is the chain 2. Counting from the bottom to the top, put your hook in this second chain right here in the peak, and this will be your 25th stitch. I've completed row 5, which was the second row of repetitions, and now we're going to start row 6, which is the third one. So I'm going to chain 2 and I'm going to turn my work. So now I want to work front post double crochet on the other stitch from the one that we're pulling in the previous row. So since the second stitch was a front post, in this row I'm going to work a regular double crochet, and starting from the third stitch, which is a regular stitch, I'm going to start working my alpine, my front posts, then a regular stitch, pull out the next one, double crochet, pull out the next one, and so on. So my 2 chains count as my first double crochet, and I'm going to start crocheting from the second stitch. 1, 2, 1 double crochet. In the next stitch, right over here, I'm going to work a front post double crochet in the row beneath. Okay. Extend your loops and work your double crochet. Next stitch, work 1 double crochet. Next stitch, work a front post double crochet in the row beneath. Next stitch, 1 double crochet. Next stitch, a front post double crochet in the row beneath. Now we're going to continue working because we saw the steps in the previous row, so they're easy. Double crochet, front post double crochet, and so on. And once I reach the third stitch from the end, count 1, 2, 3. Once I work my front post double crochet around the third stitch from the end, I'm going to turn my video back on to work the last 2 together, and then we're going to start the last row of repetitions. I've worked the last front post double crochet around the third stitch, counting from the end. Now the next 2 stitches will be 1 double crochet in each of the last 2 stitches. Okay, so 1 double crochet in the next stitch and 1 double crochet in the last stitch of the row. So I finished the row in the same way I started. I started with 2 double crochet. The first one is the chain 2, and the second one is this one that I work in the second stitch, and I finished my row with 2 double crochet as well. Now we're going to start row 7, which is the 4th row of repetitions. So starting from the first stitch, I'm going to work 1 single crochet in every stitch across for a total of 25 single crochet. 2, 3, 4, 5, and keep crocheting up until the last stitch. Okay, your 25th stitch will be the second chain counting from the bottom to the top right over here. I finished row 7 with a total of 25 single crochet. Okay, now let's start working the repetitions all over again. So what did we do in row 4? We chained 2, 1, 2, and we started working the alpine stitch from the second stitch of the row. Okay, so the chain 2 is my first double crochet, so starting from the second one, go into the row beneath and work a front post double crochet around the stitch. Okay, next stitch, 1 double crochet, next stitch, go into the row beneath to work your front post double crochet. So it's very easy, okay, if you do not remember into which row you're working, you always have to remember to look into the row beneath and see that the next stitch here is a front post. So in this row, I wouldn't work a front post around this one because I want to change the stitches. So since this is a front post, this means that on the stitch above it, I'm going to work a double crochet. And since the next stitch is a double crochet, this means that in this row, I'm going to need to work a front post. Okay, so this is an easy way to understand the stitches. Okay, so the next stitch is a double crochet. Next stitch, work a front post in the row beneath. Okay, keep working the same steps and finish the row with a front post double crochet around the second before the last stitch, and in the last stitch of the row we're going to work 1 double crochet. I've completed row 8 where I worked the same steps that I worked in the 4th row of repetitions. Now row 9 will be the same thing in the wrong side as row 5, which is 1 single crochet in every stitch across, starting from the first stitch. 1, 2, 3, and keep crocheting for a total of 25 stitches, where again the last stitch is the second chain counting from the bottom to the top. I've completed row 9. Now we're going to start row 10 by chaining 2, and in row 10 we're going to do the same exact steps as we did in row 6. So in row 6 I started by working a double crochet in the first 2 stitches, and the first stitch is my chain 2. Okay, so I'm not going to start crocheting from the first one, but work 1 double crochet in the second stitch. Okay, so I have my first 2 double crochet. Now in the third stitch, where in the row below I have a double crochet, in this row I'm going to work a front post double crochet. In the next stitch, where in the previous row I have a front post, in this row I'm going to work 1 double crochet. 1 front post around the next stitch, 1 double crochet in the next one. Okay, and keep working the same steps as we did in row 6, and right here in the end count 3 stitches from the end. 1, 2, 3. This stitch is going to be your last front post double crochet, and in the last 2 stitches of the row I'm going to work 1 double crochet, 1 here and 1 here. I have completed row 10. Now we're going to start row 11, which we are going to again repeat the steps that we did in row 7, which is 1 single crochet in every stitch because we are in the wrong side. So starting from the first stitch, work 1 single crochet in every stitch across. 1, 2, 3, and keep working one single crochet in every stitch, where again the last stitch is the second chain counting from the bottom to the top right over here. I've completed row 11 with one single crochet in every stitch, and this is how our pattern looks like at this point. Look what a beautiful results we have. Now it doesn't matter in which row that you're going to stop crocheting, okay, in the rows where you're going to work your front post and your back post, but it's very important that the last stitch of whatever project you're working is a row of single crochet, okay, to keep the stitches together. Now I'm going to work a few extra rows off camera just to see how the stitch looks once you have made a few extra rows. Okay, I've worked a few extra rows. I have weaved in my ends as well, just so it looks nice and pretty. And this is how your project will look like. Look what a nice texture this stitch has. Okay, so now since we have seen how to work this project, how to work the stitch, now we're going to see how to calculate the stitches that we need. Okay, so let's do some math. We all love math, right? Math is our favorite because it helps us calculate the number of stitches that we want, so we don't have to frog our project every time. Okay, before you start any big project, we always need to work a sample. We always need to have our gauge so we know how to calculate. This takes like 10 minutes to do, right? And it saves you from frogging big projects. So we need to know, just so you don't have to be doing your gauge every time, you know, your samples and your calculations, always write down the stitch that you're doing it for. Always write down the rule, the yarn that you're using, and the crochet hook. But please do not work your sample with the yarn that you were using, you know, the light one and the 4mm, and use the same measurements when working with a thicker yarn and a bigger crochet hook. Even if you're using the same stitch, if you change your hook size or the yarn, please do your gauge all over again because the stitches are going to be different. Okay, so I have my gauge, and let's pretend that this is 4 inches by 4. So I have 25 stitches that give me my 4 inches width and 19 rows that give me 4 inches height. And I need to work a blanket that's square. It's 30 inches by 30 inches. So firstly, we're going to start by calculating the beginning chains, which is the width of the project. And what I need to know is I'm going to multiply the stitches of my sample that gave me the 4-inch width, in this case 25 stitches, times the inches that I need for my project. In this case, the width is 30 inches. And I'm going to divide that number by the width of the sample, which is 4 inches. Okay, so let's start. I need to multiply the stitches of the sample, which were 25, times the inches that I need for my project, 30 inches. And I'm going to divide that number by the width of the sample, 4 inches. Okay, so 25 times 3, times 30. 25 times 30 is 750 divided by 4. The result is 187.5. Okay, so these are the chains that I need to start with, but because we cannot start with 187.5 chains, right, I need to round that number up or down depending on the multiples that I have, depending on the rule. My rule is multiples of 2, so this means any even number of chains. So to round it up to the next number, I'm going to start with 188 chains. Okay, 188 is an even number. Okay, 188 chains is going to give me 30 inches width. Now let's calculate the total rows that we're going to need, and this is the length of our project. So since we need to find the length of the project, I need to know the rows that gave me the 4 inches in my sample, and in this case I have 19. Okay, then I'm going to multiply that by the inches that I need for the length, in this case 30 inches, and I'm going to divide that number by the length of the sample, in this case 4 inches. So let's multiply the rows of our sample, 19 times the inches that I need for the length of my blanket, and I'm going to divide that by the length of the sample, divided by 4. Okay, so 19 times 30 is 570, and I'm going to divide that number by 4. And the result is 142.5. So these are the number of rows that I need. But because I cannot have 142.5 rows, I'm going to round that up to either 142 rows or 143 rows, depending on which one will be the row of single crochet. And I believe it's going to be the 143rd one, because the last row of repetitions was row 7, odd number of row. So you're probably going to have 143 rows. Okay, the last row, it will be the row of single crochet. Pretty easy, right? Now we're going to need to know how much yarn we're going to need for our sample. Now, in order to calculate the total yarn that you need to know how much yarn you used for this sample over here. And in order to know how much yarn you used, what I want you to do is take some yarn, take your measuring tape, okay, and measure about 6 inches of yarn. Okay, take your measuring tape and measure about 6 inches of yarn, and this before you start with your sample. Okay, round it up into a ball so you can crochet easier without your yarn getting tangled. Okay, so we have separated 6 inches of yarn, and now let's say that when I worked my sample I worked by using that yarn, and I have a little leftover yarn when I finished the sample. Once you cut the yarn and you fasten off, okay, take your measuring tape and measure how much yarn you have left. Okay, so let's say from the 6 inches of yarn that I made into a ball, I have left okay, I have a total of 6 inches of yarn into a ball. Okay, and when I finished my sample and I measured the yarn that was left over, I had 1 inch left over. So when you do that subtraction, the result is 5 inches. So this means that for my sample I used a total of 5 inches of yarn. Okay, so hold this in the side and let's do the 3 equations that we need. The first equation is the square inches of my sample. So I have my sample over here, and we worked, in order to find the square inches, I have 4 inches for the width and 4 inches for the length. And when you multiply the length times the width right over here, you get the square inches. So 4 by 4, okay, 4 times 4 give me 16 square inches. Okay, now I need to know for the second equation the square inches for the project that I'm going to crochet. So since I need to make a blanket that's 30 by 30, okay, 30 width times 30 length, I am multiplying these two numbers, and 30 times 30 is 900 inches squared. So I know the area of my sample and the area of my blanket, okay, that I need to crochet. So in the third equation, I'm going to multiply the inches of the yarn that I used in my sample, and I calculated that I need 5 inches, times the square inches that I need for my project, 900, and I'm going to divide that by the square inches of my sample. Okay, so since I made a 6-inch ball, and from that I had 1 inch left, this means that I used a total of 5 inches for my sample. So let's see how we're going to do our math. Okay, so the inches of the yarn that I used in the sample, I'm taking 5 times the square inches that I need, 900, and I'm dividing that number by the square inches of my sample, which is 16. Okay, so let's see, 5 times 900, okay, which is 4,500, divided by 16. Divided by 16, and the result is 281.25. And the result is 281.25 inches. Okay. Now I'm going to make those inches into meters. So 281.25 times 2.5, and the result is 703.125 meters of yarn that we're going to need. And since I know that in other countries yarns come into yards, we need to find out how many yards of yarn this 703.125 is. So we're doing our equation over here, and I get my 281.25 inches. Now I need to turn those inches into meters, so I am going to multiply that number by 2.5. So you always multiply by 2.5, okay? And the result is 703.125 meters. So I'm going to convert to yards, and I'm going to take this number, 7.03.125, and 1 meter equals 1.0936 yards, and the result is 769 yards of yarn that we're going to need to crochet. Okay, so I found out the inches of yarn that I used. I converted the inches into meters, and then I converted the meters into yards. I know you're kind of dizzy right now, but it's not that hard, okay? So every time that you want to convert from meters to yards, you always multiply by this number over here. And I need 769 yards of yarn. So how many skeins is this? So the skein that I just worked my sample is 361 yards. So I'm going to take the 769 yards that I need in total, and I'm going to divide by the yards that my yarn has, 361. And the result from that one is 769 divided by 361. Oops, I multiplied. divided by 361, and the result is 2.13 skeins that I'm going to need. So in order to crochet this blanket into a square, I'm going to need to buy 3 skeins of yarn. Okay, so if you need, go over to see how to calculate again. I know this part down here might be a little confusing, but if you do it over and over again and you know what each number is, then you'll be able to understand why you're doing those equations and why you're doing this math, you know, these multiplications and divisions. So this is how to calculate the number of chains, the total rows, and how many skeins you're going to need depending on the sample that you're crocheting. Okay, and again I'm going to repeat, please, if you're going to use a different yarn, a different crochet hook, you're going to need to do this whole process all over again. So this is our alpine stitch. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, and if you like the video, please press like and leave a comment. Thanks again. Bye bye.